Hi everyone, this is Shivam from the DO Club. This time we invited Prayag Shah, who is right now working at Coinbase as a senior product designer. Previously, he has worked with brands like Uber and Spotify. He gave an interactive session on whiteboarding challenge for product designer. We have been hearing this request a lot in our community about whiteboarding, the challenges they face. So we thought to invite him. He first gave a really in-depth presentation where he break out the whiteboarding challenge in different phases and shared his experience from the both side of table, practical tips, actionable insights. And then at the last, we had a super engaging question and answer session. I hope you enjoy this video. This is completely free. We believe in sharing this high quality information free with all of designers so that you people like you can benefit. I hope you enjoy this and feel free to share this with anyone else that you think can benefit. Super excited to be here with all of you. I hope my audio is fine. Cool. So first of all, a very warm welcome to Prayag from me, Paras and Asiswa. Like it's really great to have you here for this session, Prayag. Thank you for taking this time. Prayag is right now working as a senior product designer at Coinbase. Previously, he has worked with brands like Uber and Spotify, and he's a really great and humble person. Today, Prayag will help us with the whiteboarding. We have been hearing this in our design community that whiteboarding people are really also, guys, please mute yourself. Those who have not, I think someone, Ishita, can you please mute yourself? It's fine now. Great, thank you. So Prayag will just Prayag has been on the both sides of the whiteboarding. He has taken a lot of interviews. He has also done interviews when he was joining Coinbase and before. So he will present some ideas and some actionable tips regarding the same. And also we will have a interactive session with him. So over to you, Prayag. And also just one last thing, if you can switch on the cameras, that will be highly, highly appreciated, all of you.
Thank you so much, Shivam, and thank you for doing what you do with the community. I think it's very rare that people take out time from their regular jobs and like kind of give back to the community. So I'm super happy to be here. And again, for everybody who's joined in, thank you so much for like spending your Saturday with us and trying to get some insights. This is going to be a funish session. Not like I'm sure like it's not whole theory, but there will be some. Hopefully, by the end of it, you might have some actionable frameworks that you can take and practice. And let's keep it interactive. Let's make sure that you can put in your questions and stuff like that. Overall, we would be like probably taking the questions at the end of the session, and we will also they will also like you can put it in the chat, and we they will be upvoted. The most upvoted questions will generally be highlighted. We'll try and cover as many as possible, and that's about it. So yeah, excited to be here and start the session. Let me just share my screen. Cool. So like Shivam already gave a basic introduction to me, but I'm super thrilled to be here. I'm currently a product designer at Coinbase. And before we jump into more technical, I just want to give you some insights as to like what I am as a human. So currently I'm learning how to live in present, which has been like the biggest challenge, and I'm trying to see how to work towards this. Currently reading various design books in terms of understanding how to articulate design decisions. I also try and host design nights often to give back to the community, and the kind of deep dives I'm trying to learn is scuba, where I was swimming with like whales in Australia. And I also have like a passion of documenting Indian art, where I'm trying to cover like different folk arts and put it in a modernized palette. And I'm also learning how do building habits work and trying to focus a little bit on there, a little bit of human side of me. At Coinbase, I designed like foundational frameworks, basically finding common patterns that can be used across their Coinbase products. So it's a mix of UI systems and platform design. And before that, I have around like 12 years of experience, which passed before Coinbase. I was with Uber for almost 3 years, where I was leading the mobility side of things, that is the rider experiences, and I designed the whole Uber bus product, which currently now runs in Delhi, Mumbai, and like hopefully will be join like starting soon in Hyderabad. It also is there in like Egypt and Ukraine. But basically at Uber, what I learned is how to build global products and how to work across timelines and how to build for global users. By building for local users, how do we scale it to global users? Before that, I had the opportunity to partner with Spotify for helping them launch in India, where we worked for building the design system, editorial design system for scaling their local languages. And before that, I was working with Leaf Design, which is a design studio, and this is where I essentially learned and honed my T-shape skills. So I worked on branding, digital products, wayfinding, you name it, and I have must have worked on it. I joined there as an intern, and by the end of 7 years, I was offered to become a partner, but then COVID changed my plans. So just a glimpse of what like at Uber, because I was like one of the first designers hired after COVID. I had the opportunity to work across a lot of different products. So this is just a glimpse of what I've done at that. Now we could dive into straight into the work. So just like a quick question as to like how many of you have done a design challenge round before, and what do you think is the hardest part? Feel free to like put in the answers on the chat. So I could probably take in. I have an understanding of the room as to how can I get the flowing in. Anyone like have you done the design challenge round, not done a design challenge round? Thinking on my feet, Rashmi, that makes sense. So cool. I think we'll take a much more basic approach then. I think a lot of people don't have an understanding, but a lot of times, as Rashmi mentioned, like thinking on the feet, and a lot of people feel that it's an unbiased test, specifically because it covers like it asks you to make a app in like 30 minutes or 40 minutes, which to be honest is unrealistic for me as well. But we know that for the recruiters and for the interviewers, this is the closest and the most easy closest they can get to reality, and hence this process is not going to go anywhere. However, we might feel that it's an unbiased process or whatever it may be. We like design channel is going to be here, and it's better to just have an understanding or a framework as to how do we work around it. So this is something that the one of the recruiters also says, that like whiteboard challenges where the truth comes out clearly and you are able to really understand the designers. 73% of hiring managers say that a candidate's ability to break down a problem is more important than a polished portfolio. So portfolio just is basically your screen, just gets you entry point, but design challenge round is the one that will be the most critical in your hiring decision. Almost 60% of candidates get rejected on the portfolio round, which is a huge, sorry, on the design challenge round, which is kind of a huge number, I think. So what is a design challenge round? It is an interactive round, generally interactive round, which has like much more deeper in the process of the interview process, and preferably the final stage, where you would be given a problem statement or a prompt to solve and bring it back to the team or like individual if possible. It does heavily influence a hiring decision and also the most challenging part of the interview. Why it works? Because there's no faking it and it's as close to reality as it can get. The only constraint here is the timeline, and that is what probably we could understand how to practice it around. Today, it comes in two critical formats. One is like live, which earlier, because before COVID, it was whiteboard. Now people prefer to do it on Figma, FigJam, whatever your tool of choice. That's open-ended, but it's mainly live, and where you generally have one or two people or a panel where you can work with them. This live challenge generally focus on how candidate approaches the problem, what their process is, and how they work with the team. And they're not specifically looking at your visual skills or your software skills or anything specifically here. So but then there's the other side of it of design challenge, which is the take home exercise, which is generally focuses more on visual and design craft. And this is generally potent for early or entry level positions because it gives a clear understanding of the skill set that people have. And like generally entry level roles don't have like a lot of experience candidates, and this is where they can really test or validate it. Today we're going to focus more on the live side of things, like the whiteboard or the Figma challenge, and what kind of prompts do we generally expect. So there are like on a very surface level, there are two formats. One is the blue sky, and the other is like an objective. Like in blue sky, you would be given like a build a new product. So basically, design a desktop app or design a mobile product, generally with users in mind or not users in mind, and or there are like broader conceptual tasks which might require you to go beyond just the interface. So like design an ATM or design an alarm clock for the blind. The second set of it is like change or improve an existing product. It's specifically generally used for mainly SaaS products or something where it's very specifically focused on a metric and an audience is already given. And this is generally rarely given. It's only when there is a very specific role and they are trying to focus, like the interviewers are trying to focus on that, filling that specific kind of position itself. So the blue sky or the build a new product, generally the prompts are kept vague, ambiguous, and as open as possible. The reason for that is that the interviewers are trying to understand your ability to navigate ambiguity and making how do you from ambiguity to how do you narrow it down to a more specific or a more streamlined route. The other thing that you can expect is like generally if in your previous round there are particular skill sets that they have not been able to figure out, then this round also kind of touches on that, and then interviewers are given a brief to nudge you into those kind of directions. So kind of always try and be alert and see like what are they trying to gauge with it and what specifically are interviewers looking for. So on a very fundamental or the basic layer, they're looking at your articulation, your communication and collaboration skills. So make sure whenever you start this, you think out loud. You are involving your panel and the interviewer. They're also looking to understand your product and business sense. So except users, as a designer, we are always obsessed with the users, but this is where you can also bring in like how design really understanding the value of design and how that value is implicated for the business or the product. The last is like more specific is like your design process as to like how do you approach a problem, how do you go by ideation, how do you really what kind of tools do you use to bring clarity and things. And the last is pressure handling or understanding how you work under pressure. So these are like the core four things that they are looking for. Again, as I said, like there could be a chance where you are already like there's something specific that the you that might have been discovered in your interview and they might prompt you. So you can always ask clarifying questions as soon as it starts. If there is not an understanding, this is just like I'm just trying to show you here like what are the if you have to bring down what they're looking for. So like do they ask questions? Do they communicate clearly? Do they make a process or directly jump to the solution? Do they have valid assumptions? Do they have valid hypotheses? Do they think about the users and their context and their different needs? So this is how like across the whole spectrum of things, there are these kind of prompts that the interviewer might be looking for. I'm gonna take a quick break before we jump into the framework. If Shivam, you think there are like any burning question that we want to handle or we can handle at the end of it, but happy to take a pause here.
Yeah, I think we can take up with two, three questions that might be a little bit more interactive. We'll take three questions. So first is by Kavya, not knowing what is a good benchmark and overall expectations.
What is a good benchmark and
Overall expectations.
overall expectations? I think this summarizes it, right? Like, so the expectations are for you to think out loud and take me through your design process, make sure that you collaborate as much as possible. And the most important part that I think people often forget is that the visuals are not going to be important that much, but never leave the interview with a blank canvas. Like always make sure that you touch the wireframes, low fidelity or high fidelity. That is something that you can always get clarity from your interviewer before it starts. But making sure that you are able to concretize an idea through the process is kind of important. And making sure like so generally interviewers will there are two types of interviewers. One is who's going to be very passive and one who will be active. But your job is to make sure that you keep communicating and make sure that there are prompts and don't kind of give open-ended prompts but lead with confidence like I am going to choose this audience, what do you think about it, versus a question which says that hey, which audience do you think we should pick. So that's the kind of like way you should collaborate with it. You could also often have like interviewers or the panel have different roles to play and make them involved and make them a user and ask questions based on that users. I generally do that and that makes it easier for you to think on the spot. So you are not thinking, but you are like probably asking the questions and making sure that you keep jotting down those answers. Does that help, Kavya?
Great. Thank you. The next one, Vishnu is asking, have I, so sometime, we can have in between the midway crisis, like we can have this thoughts in between that, have I chosen the right way to solve the problem? Am I doing the right thing? I could have done it in the better way. So how do you deal with the midway crisis, these thoughts that comes up sometime?
That's a great question, and I think it's very, very easy to feel trapped, feel scared, get blocked, or something during this challenge. Two solutions that I often generally go is first is it's okay to ask for help. If you feel stuck, you could just take a step back and ask the interviewer to help you or guide you a little bit in terms of that. So it does not really, it might cut 1 or 2 points, but it also adds 5 points to you because you are vulnerable, you understand the need of the hour and you are willing to ask for help whenever it's required and not trying to solve for it. There are times when you might feel so there is no right answer to this whiteboarding solution in general, right? That there's no way that I am going to see for a solution that you to make a solution that is going to solve everything in that particular session. So there is no way to go wrong. if you follow a process and if you take me through your process and kind of have certain key uh, milestones or checkpoints checked in, you should be good to go. But there is no right answer at the end of it. Like you can think of various users, but basically how do you think based on that user and how do you ideate and how do you step to that next level is what we are looking at.
So Vrinda is asking how to solve a problem or ask the right question with limited domain/industry knowledge.
So I think generally whiteboarding sessions do give prompts which are more specific to these domains that we don't interact with daily, and that is the whole idea of it. So basically, they would have like doctors or a very specific niche kind of focus, and that is deliberately done so that we are able to understand the process and your thinking. It's about understand driving through product and driving through users, right? The question stays the same. You don't need to really change the domain for it, but asking these questions will give you the knowledge of that domain, and that is what exactly the idea is through whiteboarding.
Cool, thanks, Prayag. We can move back to the presentation, I think, and at the end we can take the more
Sure, sure.
questions now.
So I have like a so now we've defined what a whiteboard challenge is, what to expect, and things like that. And then how do I personally approach it? Like this is something that I have like evolved the process to it, and I've tried to simplify it at the core of it. Again, like there are a lot of existing frameworks that you can tap into, but what my personal advice is that use the process that best defines your work, and to discover that what you could do is this, just flip through all the case studies that you've gone and be honest to yourself and build a framework or structure that will help you guide it. So go back, dive into your work. Don't follow a very strict process in terms of like obviously there's a double diamond, there's the five W's, one H, there's circle method, temple method. Like a lot of these acronyms are there available to you. All of them have the same process. If you work better through questions, then use 5W1H. If you work better through like an acronym based thing, you can use something like circle method, which is something that Google uses or has probably done it. But whatever it is, you make sure that it is honest to you, because that is how you will not get stuck. If you try to if you or kind of copy something that is not honest to you, there are chances for you to get stuck, or there are chances to suddenly feel very lost in middle of the process, because that's something that you've not been used to. So what I did is like I broke down all of these complicated process and made it lightweight. So rather than having like 5 or 6 quadrants, 10 quadrants, like there are these various formats that you will have it on. Like if you just search for jam whiteboard sessions, or if you search on Google, you will find like a lot of frameworks there. But this is something that I have, like you could name it whatever you want. You could call it PAS, that is a problem approach solution. You could call it DDIS, you could call it CPS. CPS is something that I use personally, which allows me to go broader. So it's the context space, problem space, and solution space. And that is how I generally divide my whiteboards, Figma or like Figma board as soon as I start. And that gives a certain basic structure to it. Then once I get into that, I start with the phase one. So phase one, or as soon as you start the prompt, make sure to write down the prompt and read it twice or thrice aloud, and ask by asking clarifying questions to the interviewer about what are the core objectives, that like what are the expectations, what are they really looking at as a deliverable. So are they looking at high fidelity solutions, are they looking at low fidelity solutions, are they looking just to have like set of ideas, and based on whatever they prompt you, you have to like kind of customize or personalize your structure. Once you have those basic clarification in, and a lot of times what happens is like the prompt itself has like the what and the how or the who plugged in. So if they are giving you for an existing product, there would be a certain metrics to reach, or there might be a certain user cohort they already might have defined. It depends on, like, it's completely independent of it. But if there are these things, then make sure that you note it down, highlight it down, and keep it somewhere in the in your on your board, which is in the like kind of a side panel. Post that, like what you can how do you can approach is like you start with understanding why is the problem important. So for example, if we just say I need to design an alarm bell for the blind, so why is this problem important? So you try to kind of understand, like, okay, the blind people do not there's no current solution existing. There are other people who are they are always dependent on other people they could use for XYZ things. How a business, what kind of business. Generally I also try to, if there's no brand or something specified, I generally tie it back to a particular brand, which allows to give it more context. So for example, like Amazon wants to build the alarm clock for blind because of their CSR or something like that, and that gives you like a little bit more narrative. So that narrative building helps in break more thinking and more ideas. Then leading to it, you can think about the opportunities. You could ask the interviewer or the panel for if there is any existing data available, if there are any constraints that they are aware of, like do they have like is there a timeline constraint, is there a team constraint, is there like a budget constraint. So this shows your business thinking and your product thinking. Sometimes they might not have answers, sometimes they withhold information, but by asking these questions you are able to showcase that you understand like how to break down a problem, you understand how a business works, you understand how a product works, and how all of these come together to build a great solution. Once you have all of this defined, jump into the audience, or we can call it the opportunity groups. So basically what I do is there are very easy ways to approach it. You can have certain opportunity groups always in your head. So there would be like elderly, there will be Gen Z, there'll be teenagers, there'll be just gender focused, or there'll be doctors. And a lot of times you could also have like a primary and secondary. So there are like two sides to it. So for example, again, if I take the example of the design an alarm for the blind, so there can be two people. There's the person who's like the blind person, and probably somebody who's the caretaker or the help. So it could be like a primary, secondary audience also. Or if you're creating like a marketplace for a doctor, so there could be doctor and there could be the patient, and then there could be, so that way also you could always approach these audiences. So once you have these, like overall you should kind of keep thinking of these users and then drop down into their pain points, context as to where they are using it, what is the emotion with what they are using it, and what are the existing solutions that are there, and how do they not solve for it. And this will kind of give you a very critical part, or the first phase structure, that is the how might we statement or the design brief, which you can take to the next level. So personally what I do is with every these kind of three tier structure or four tier structure or whatever structure you want to use, but whenever you go from one space to another space, make sure that there is one deliverable that you have gotten clearly. So you can always track back and change it if you think, okay, like the user that you chose is probably not solving a lot of things, or when you start ideating. So you can always go back and say like, hey, I think probably this audience feels a little constrictive, and I think we could pick this audience because I think there are like lot more ideas, or lot more ways for the problem to be solved, or there are these, they have more burning problems than the specific audience. But having these kind of specific structures to kind of take you to the next level will always guide you, and you'll not feel lost. So this is like in the first scenario, like ask your interview to role play with it. That is something that I try to do it, depending, like obviously you have to read the room. If he's passive, they will be passive. If they are active, or but if you keep asking them what do they think, that is going to showcase less credibility for you. But making them a particular role, like, hey, if you have somebody who's blind at your home, what do you think are the challenges that they face? So that way they are also kind of brainstorming with you, they're kind of ideating with you, and you also get answers. So you don't have to like think of questions and answers, but you're just thinking of questions. And across all of this, make sure you're typing, writing, whatever, like putting it out on the Figma. And that is also one of the biggest challenge I find during whiteboard is a lot of people start typing, they stop talking. If they talk, they stop typing. So that kind of muscle memory is something you'll have to build. Type everything that you're thinking, so that there's no confusion as to when to type and when not to type. So post this, you go to the phase two of it, where you can generally, based on the how might we statement, that is like how might we, like then you define the key jobs to be done for that user, or what is the user goal overall. I also kind of bring in some design principles. So basically based on that how might we statement, I try to build two or three design principles. What that design principle helps me is helps me in ideating also, as well as prioritizing my ideas. So whenever I need to prioritize the ideas, or see that which idea is going to be helpful, you can go back to your design principles, you can go back to your how might be statements and things like that. So here in the phase two, you have to kind of break it down to the jobs to be done, and based on jobs to be done, start ideating. In terms of ideation, how I approach is I keep generally a big list of ideas, and that is what my tip would here be, is basically, so go across spectrums, don't only focus on interfaces until the brief is not, if brief is specific to interfaces, but think of like hybrid, think of variables, think of marketplaces, think of communities, think of just a particular feature, think of AI, think of new technologies, think of using sound, think of using haptic. So go beyond. So these are like your set tools that you can just plug in and have like five, six ideas. Generally, those are, and then once you have these ideas, you go back to prioritizing, and or you only talk about the pros and cons of each ideas, and then you can put in like, and for prioritizing you can put in like an impact versus effort kind of this, or you can say like this idea, probably if you're looking at a physical device, you could probably look at the constraints that it might have, be costly to make, or it might include this charge, and then this it might be harmful for the environment. If you're doing for CSR and you're making a physical product which is going to be made out of plastic, then that might be against it. So kind of bringing in real time constraints to prioritize your ideas, and like whichever solves the problem for the business metrics would be great. So probably by the end of phase two, you should have like a final idea drilled down and a design brief to take it forward. So as I said, like here my tip is to have like a big bag of idea list. Make sure like you could also just put a post-it in front of you or something. I generally have now got an idea of understanding, but say look at technology, look at in beyond interfaces, and you will generally have like a lot of these ideas come in. And the phase three, or the last phase, would be the most critical part of it. Here you could start with like whatever idea. So basically start with a start and end of the user flow journey. So you can roadmap it, you can like user map it. The whole journey, you could just probably follow a key task. You could have an, if you already have narrow it down to a dashboard, you could just build an information architecture. Before jumping into wireframe, make sure that you have clarity as to what you want, clarity of the flow or clarity of the information that will be there in the flow. Then you start wireframing. Overall, I think low fidelity is has to be fine until there's a very specific requirement of high fidelity. Skip the basic screens. Like you don't really need to create like onboarding screens and stuff like that, because that's something until your idea generally revolves around it. If it's a growth based metric that you are chasing, then probably onboarding might be something that is interesting. But if not, then make sure that you're able to focus on the key journey of that really brings out the idea, or the key feature that brings out the idea, and make sure that there's an start and an end as well. Like you could probably have like just a start, or like a very basic start and a basic end, but make sure that there's a flow for the user, for the interviewer to understand it. What I recommend is to, so before, say if you have like a whiteboarding session coming up, just go through apps and sit down for 3 4 hours, keep sketching core wireframes and build that speed for yourself, and get a little bit of understanding of what are the common patterns. So you're not really breaking your head on feeling what pattern to use, but just trying to execute it. A lot of these are not like, you are not going to be judged on the final output of your wireframes or your designs, but basically based on how well did were you able to communicate the idea that you had presented. So make sure that like you go a little wilder in terms of your explorations, and don't stick to like the most basic patterns. And phase four is the last phase. Generally, I don't keep it as an acronym, but this is something that you, if you go to do it, you get brownie points for it. So basically, summarizing all your process, thinking back or reflecting back as to like alternatives. Like somebody asked the question, like if you are on the wrong direction, what would you do? So this is something that at the end of it you could kind of highlight, and also say that like if I had like more time, I would have like, I thought I chose the wrong audience, so I could probably go back, or I chose the wrong idea, or I think if I've chosen this idea it would have been better. And also thinking of ways to validate your ideas. So basically giving an idea as to like, if I had like a full team, I would have researched XYZ before I jumped into ideas, so I could have clarity. Here I would have user tested two three various options before I designed. If I get into this wireframing stage, if I have to launch and learn from it, what could the MVP be, what could be the metrics, and understanding and sharing your design tools or cross-functional design experiences of bringing in research or bringing in data always highlights and is going to add a lot of value to your session. And for metrics to track, again, like it's a very simple framework here as to, it's either going to be growth, is going to be retention, or it's going to be engagement. Then you can, based on your specific product or your idea, you could probably bring out like what is going to be like, is it going to be time to value that you want to measure, you want to measure acquisition, you want to measure the time spent on the platform, you want to measure tasks completed successfully, you want to measure satisfaction score. So on a framework level, it's just growth, retention, and engagement. But you can always drill down and get into deeper and showcase how you understand the product and business overall. So overall, like if I have to take like for an interviewer or for somebody who's going to be soon doing this challenge, few key takeaways that I think can be helpful, and like things that people feel is like be friendly and confident. Make sure that you always think out loud, follow a structure, and approach with the user in mind. Do not feel trapped. People honestly, interviewers want you to succeed at that challenge. They are trying to set you up for success. So make sure that you go with that feeling because you've come this far in the process, right? So they are invested in your application. So do not feel that pressure, but feel make it more real, make it try and see that if you'll be working with this person and kind of change that narrative from interview to bringing making it like a fun exercise. Collaborate with them. A lot of times people kind of forget to ask for time check-in, and that way they don't end up either rushing through the ideas or like rushing through the fourth phase. So make sure that you are able to divide your phases. So here like I first phase I generally push like 10 minutes. Second, third phase is like, oh, generally I put 15 minutes, and the last stage is like 2 or 4 minutes for just summarizing things. And they would have like 5 to 10 minutes for question answers. And lastly, you can just start practicing because this is going to be something which is driven by a muscle memory. And yeah, that's all, folks. Thank you so much for spending the Saturday with us. Happy to take questions and feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, whatever works better for you. But yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Prayag, for doing the session. Now we can do the Q&A. Loved every bit, loved the detail and also the font choice, everything in your presentation speaks for itself. So let's do the question and answers now. So Jay is asking, how do you keep your ideas user-centered when you don't have access to real data from
I
users?
think again, then you can drive through making a lot of assumptions or hypotheses. So when you don't have data, it's free to either
Yeah, please, sorry,
making
continue.
assumptions and putting those assumptions kind of can guide you. So if you don't have data, you can just say, okay, like a new user data, you have some kind of new user data, or you can just focus on the pain points of those users and to dive deeper into those pain points. You could look at the context or a context and when and where are they using it. So that should drive a lot of this way to for you to kind of bring ideas. So when you build your how might we statement, right? Either you can make it narrower, I can, or you can make it more broader, whichever suits you or whatever, like however you read the room, and then having those ideas as to like what is going to add more value to that particular solution would kind of help. And it's good if you can like if you don't have data, but you could really mention that in the interview, right? Like if this was a real scenario, I would have loved to get data on these users or understand specifically where is the drop off happening in the process, or like what exactly is the new user looking for. But how would you really use that information? Then either the interview can give you like an hypothetical data, and then how do you use that information will be critical. So you have to navigate through it a little smartly, because when you ask for information and then you don't use that information is also going to kind of hamper your things a little bit.
Makes sense. Okay, the next question, the votes and checking out the questions. Deva has a question. Yeah, sure, Deva, you can speak also. We don't have much questions. So, okay, yeah, please, over to you.
Yeah, hi, I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
I had posted a question in the chat that was basically around the fact that a lot of the things that you have mentioned today, it also overlaps somewhat with a product manager's job also, and the classic PM interview as well, because the way in which we have the different phases in which you described all of the processes in the way in which we can approach a whiteboarding challenge, there is a lot of alignment and overlap that I see with a very classic PM interview style also. So I just wanted to understand when you talked about the metrics part as a designer. So basically, the idea here is to expose the right kind of metrics so as to give confidence to the interviewer that we have the right business sense, right? That's the only thing that we want to share there. So,
Correct.
is there an example that you could give us wherein we could essentially? I'm trying to ask how do we improve the skill of spotting the right metrics, because a lot of times I've seen people throw out these vanity metrics like NAU, DAU, absolutely, which has got nothing to do with the design as such. So when we are doing let's say a developer handoff after a finished design, how do we, what exactly do we mean by metrics there, and how do we share the perfect metrics for a answer? That's the question. Sorry, it's a very convoluted question.
No, I think that is a fair question, and I agree. Like there is a lot of overlap in terms of what PM and this, and like to be honest, the more senior you go in your career, the more these boundaries get blurred as to like how much what would product own and what would design on. I think metrics again. I highlighted it as a as a phase in the last as a last summarization, but overall it will be defined before you jump into ideation or once you define your idea, right? So what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve? So are you trying to get more people on the platform? Are you able trying to improve, say, just the engagement for them? Are you improving particular flow for them? So based on that, you could probably approach it. And again, I think you just need to have an understanding so that you know how your design is going to tie back to the real value that the business will create. If you are not able to do that, I think again until senior level, you're not really expected to say that. But if you say, if you give this understanding, it adds a lot of value to your application. And what you said makes 100% sense as to like don't throw random metrics because that will cut points. Rather, if you understand like okay, this is going to focus specifically on say acquisition, right? Or growth, then you can like give in like growth channels. If you think that okay, you're specifically focusing on engagement, then you can like bring in some engagement metrics. All of this will be defined when before you dive into ideation. So before ideation or the design principles or the problem statement that you have will have like some kind of what do you say, like a lever that will give you tie back to it. So how might we for blind people make it easier to set an alarm, for example? If that is like the problem statement I am ideating on, then the metrics here would be success, like task success.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Great. So, next one from Bhagyashree. As a designer, how should we become better in design thinking? And how to think like a senior designer?
I think again,
Hmm.
we, I think until you are not a senior also, like first thing is like as a designer we should be craft oriented. That is the core challenge or the core difference that the design and PMs have, right? Like if Deba also said like, and the more senior you go, the more your work goes beyond the craft. But until senior designer, you have to focus and polish your craft to the detailing of the best that you can. Once you want to start growing, again impacting a lot of these decisions which go beyond your design is where the seniority comes in. Understanding and advocating for user is something that is expected a lot out of you. So making sure that you are always presenting your problems or your designs based on users challenges and understanding like what business problem it is solving. Third thing could be how often and how do you bring in more cross-functional collaboration and understand their constraints and solve through those constraints, right? Like it's very easy for engineers to say that this will take like 6 weeks, so we can't ship it. So you go back and you change the design. But this is where your understanding of value and design has to come in, where you can like you have to understand like where to push back and where not to push back and what kind of battles you want to fight. So understanding that okay, if it goes 6 weeks and how important is like without the solution that MVP is, does it still solve the solution, the problem that the user has? If not, then how do you navigate through that? So those kind of discussion is something that is more expected from you as you go senior. In terms of improving design thinking, I think it's an again a muscle memory. Try training, try looking things with more observation. Like when you experience a product, start looking at those products. Not only when generally what happens is as soon as you start designing for finance app, you'll keep go
Hmm.
and go down through like 10 finance apps. Then day to day you are using all of these apps a lot, so like kind of always try and see and observe how the new features have come in, try and be connected with a lot of these communities which are there are like a lot of people sharing. I think reading also generally helps a lot, but more than reading, I think writing helps the most. When you write down your process without before even starting to sketch, write down a document as to what you have, what is the understanding, what you want to achieve, and all of it, and that will give you a lot of clarity in terms of how do you want to move forward with it. Like it's a multi-layered question. I don't know if I can give you very specific things. Probably happy to chat more offline. There are like a lot of deep
Hmm.
nuances to it.
Yep. Next one by Siddhi. So I'll give her the mic as it might require a bit of context. Yeah, you can ask
Sure,
Siddhi
thank you so much.
about the design
Prayag,
principles
thanks
rule,
for this
right?
amazing session, though. Can you please elaborate a bit on the design principles as you mentioned? Like what exactly the hiring person is looking for? Because I gave one interview of Porter, okay, recently. So that time it was like the person who was taking my interview, he had a lot of biasness. Okay. He came with a set of expectations, and what I was giving was totally different. Okay. Then at a point he said ki you don't have design principles. Then I was like, bro, it's okay. We can have different point of views. And it is not like we have to come to a common thing. Maybe I'm thinking something else, you are thinking something else. So how to deal with such situations and what exactly they are looking for? Because he exactly mentioned the same thing, that your design principles are not strong.
I think again, like it's a very broad, and I need more context. I think if you're, by the way, what you're saying, I think the interviewer being biased is something that is not recommended at all. Right? Me being on both sides, we know that we've been given strict guidelines as to like focus more on the process and understanding like your approach. And as you mentioned, right, like it could be different ways to think of different things. What you are saying here is specifically, is it the design principles that I mentioned in the process, or was it an open-ended statement saying that your design principles are not strong? So if those, then I think they might be pointing to saying that your design thinking is not great. But how to avoid these kind of situation is, again, like when you start, ask as many possible clarifying questions as you can. Like take 2 to 5 minutes, don't need to rush in everybody. Again, like I think a good interviewer should be unbiased, and they should try to help you set up for success. But if not, then it's not something that you should take in personally. But if you have to learn, then learn that. If you have to take one thing, probably you can just think of making sure that you get the expectations very clearly. And they might be probably looking at having much more like higher visual fidelity is what I think. I'm not sure, but I think just ask
Mm.
what are the expectations, right? I think a lot of times we forget to do that. And what happens is like we've been given either like the recruiter, or you might be sent like they have like a dedicated page of that interview process or a deck or something. And in that, the whiteboarding session is already given. Like there are some guidelines to it, like, hey, this will be this will be that. And to read that like often. But a lot of times when the interviewers come into the interview, they want to either change that process, go a little step away from what they might be doing, or they want to specifically look for certain feedback, certain signals that they might have not gotten during your interview rounds. So they might be wanting to figure that out. So if that is the case, so again, like asking them like few open-ended questions, or like getting clarity, expectation setting right, should be helpful.
Great. Next question is quite prevalent in this time by Kuldeep. So I have a different concern, even though I have almost a year of UX intern experience at Siemens and a mature understanding of interview process. I am finding it challenging to get shortlisted or receive proper responsive to begin with. Despite various steps and refinement, entry-level UX roles seem saturated. And without strong referrals, it's difficult to break into good product-based companies. Could you please guide aspirant designers like myself on how
I think
to
that's a
effectively
very
navigate this
relevant question,
challenge?
and I think
Yeah.
often hear this a lot in terms of like entry level roles. Also, people requiring 3 years experience, and there are these different memes around it and all of it. So I do get the frustration, Kuldeep, and it's a very fair understanding. I think what you have known is correct. Like referrals work 100% the best. So far, all my interviews I've got are through, like, not all interviews, but like mostly a lot of interview or the first screening makes it easier by referral. But if you can't get referrals or anything, I think try and make sure that your resume and your portfolio does get catered to the role requirements. So that allows for the screening. Try and make sure that if you can find the recruiter and get on call with them, because a lot of times your profile might just not get highlighted to them. So if you can find the recruiter, just cold email them. If you find like somebody from that design team, kind of try and get some visibility with that, and make sure that again, like, you're always being polite, you're always being giving back to the community, and try and do your part also, just not taking from the community. So that is how your cycle of network will kind of keep building. The other thing that I think a lot of way that you can solve is by sharing a lot of your work, right? If you keep like, and don't share like case studies, don't kind of chunk, you have all the work done already, don't need to copy any work, just chunk it out, those work, create a different or great craft, keep sharing it, try and reach out to people, and then there'll be more inbound kind of requests rather than you trying to apply. So that is also one way that you can look at it. But it is something that's like a problem that does not like there's no specific solution to it. Building your network and sharing your work is the way out.
Thanks for taking up the
Yeah.
question and really appreciate the session. I mean, it's been pretty much great so far. And hello, Prayag. Myself, my name is Karthik actually. Yeah, but I go by the name of carbon-based life form. So yeah, kind of, it's just basically saying I'm human. So, anyways, my question for you, Prayag, is that you've been into this all these good companies and you have worked across multiple of teams and all. My question to you would be in regards to, if you were supposed to design a design challenge or a whiteboarding session, how would you approach it, right? And what would be the end outcomes that you would look in a candidate, right? And how would you measure them based on whatever they kind of perform in the session itself? So yeah, I mean, if you can give some insights on that, that would really help me at least get some sense, like how would you design and how would you measure?
100%. Let me kind of mute it. I think two things that I can. There are two questions here. One is that if I had to create a design challenge, how would I approach that? And then the second question is like, what are the things that you're looking? What are the things or signals that give you like good success for the candidate to go through? So I'll take the first one first. In general, I have like in smaller companies, I've been able to be more vocal about how to create these design challenges. But what you can expect is two things. One is more, they will be like kind of, the questions will be something that you don't interact with daily. It will be something that is going to be more niche. So because then we want you to showcase your process. So designing, for example, designing an alarm clock for a blind, or like designing an app for pet walkers, or something like that, or a parking for a design a parking for a theme park. So these kind of things which you don't really interact more day to day is like they are purposely kept these kind of prompts and statements which are more niche. They would definitely be open ended because we want to see how you bring clarity from this open ended and how do you narrow it down, right? You have to like at every stage you will have to narrow down certain things. So if I start with a theme park problem statement here, like, or a pet walker statement, so there could be like various users, which is like pet owners, there could be pet walkers, there could be like just pet stores. So and then how do you narrow it down to a specific user? What are the points problems for that specific user? And then how, based on that user specific problems, what are the solutions that you suggest? So kind of this, when it's a more open-ended statement, it gives more room for you to showcase your process. So these statements will generally be open-ended. Very rarely it will be very specific with business metric or something like that. So overall, when you approach or when you want to create a problem statement or a design challenge round for your organization or something, you should kind of look at how what will be the best kind of ways for the candidate to showcase their design thinking and design process. That is the core goal of this product and business sense. Communication and collaboration again is like soft skill, but the most hard skill that we're looking at is design process, and how do you break down a problem and how do you bring clarity from ambiguity. This will be again the same answer for the next following question as to like what is the success criteria that I look at. I think first is understanding their thought process and making sure that they have followed a process. That would be like the first or the most basic level of thinking, like, and are they trying to retrofit a process? That is also something that would cut points, because how you need to kind of improvise based on whatever information you get. So that is also something that we look at. And like core four things, like, are you able to have more ideas? Are you able to define the user and user problems? And how do you, and when you sketch, what are the kind of detailing that you're looking at, and how are you showcasing your ideas in the best way in the wireframes, right? Because if it's low or high fidelity does not matter, but how do you best bring out the ideas that you are trying to present, like, so that will be like an overall understanding or overall criteria of judging the candidate. Very rarely do I look at solving for looking at like how innovative are the ideas or how well did they sketch. These are the things that you need to really avoid, because it's not about how many ideas can you generate. It's about just trying understanding how do you solve a problem, and are these ideas really solving that problem, and are you able to pick the right idea, are you able to and weigh off the trade-offs clearly. So this is where probably like overall how you could you could approach the users, the what do you say, like auditing of the candidate.
So next one by Jaya. What's the this is this bit broad question. What's the most common mistake candidate make
Yeah,
during
I did
whiteboarding
have a
challenges, and
slide
how
on that,
can
but I
we
just
avoid
removed
it?
it because it's like when I talk about the pink elephant, you will try and just think about the pink elephant. So that's why I kind of removed it. But make sure that you always, common mistake that people do is start isolating themselves and start sketching by themselves. So you need to make sure that you are able to collaborate and you are able to bring in the interviewer as much as possible and you are thinking out loud. Need any tool, type, but make sure that you are able to walk them through what's going in your head and typing it down. So there is like some kind of interaction continuously happening. Whenever you get overwhelmed, a lot of users lose it and then like it goes a little haywire. So make sure that you feel confident enough to take a break for 2 minutes, or you can just say like, can I have like a minute to just consolidate everything that I have? Like I'm feeling this because we know that it is a pressure test, and then in reality nobody's going to ask you to do this in like 30 minutes or 50 minutes. So we understand the pressure, but then you have to just make sure that you're able to tell them clearly. And how would working with you be like do you get really agitated by in saying anything? So those kind of like making as real as possible should be great. The other thing is people not able to like people spend a lot of time in the discovery parts of things that they don't really reach the sketching, and that would definitely be a red flag. Like if you're not able to reach the sketching part of it or like wireframing part of things, that would kind of bring you in crux. But if it is not, it's not necessary that it will be challenge. It will be like very strongly considered red flag if your process and things were highlighted. But make sure that you're always able to don't leave without an empty with an empty canvas. The third pitfall or like third of the other things is like people ideating randomly without like, so there are these users that you define or the problem statement you define, but none of these ideas are like kind of solving that problem. So make sure that like one or two ideas are able to solve those problems. And how do you um, prioritize those ideas also is interesting. Like how do you use real-time constraints? Do you tie back to any data that you got during this, or do you tie back to impact versus effort? So that understanding of a broader understanding of how it works in real time, like cross-functional understanding should also really help. So kind of highlight it, but don't kind of fake it. Make sure that you are not saying things just for the sake of saying it, and don't try to retrofit any process. Go back to your processes.
Well said. The next one by Ananya is little also interesting and funny also. What if the prompt is wacky and vague? I got this prompt for a whiteboard challenge. You are working for a intergalactic construction firm. Your new client is looking to build a space colony for 100 adult Earthlings on a new planet that accommodates their survival and needs. The planet climate wavers from 150-degree Fahrenheit to 30-degree Fahrenheit. So humans will need protection for solar heat and colder periods. The landscape is similar to a sandy beach. I want to meet this product manager with moon dust that files dust about large trees and small lakes. Humans will have essential jobs, operate, etc., etc. And then the ask was that design an outer space colony that is safe for human earthlings to inhabit. Do you think
So I think
if
again this comes on the
something
second
that
side of
this weird
prompts,
is
right?
possible?
As I said, there's like two things. One is blue sky, which is like a little shorter and open ended. This comes on the more specific side of things where a lot of information is already given to you. So here what they're looking at is like how do you distill information and how do you structure that information in the format versus thinking out through those things. So you have been given a user, you have been given the pain points, you've been given a context in terms of what is the landscape and the scenario, and you've also been given what the specific ask is. So it does kind of feel that okay, like your whole things that you had ideas or the thing that you would approach, it's to throw you off, it's to throw you off that structure. So here you can still follow the same process because it's just like distilling that information and probably going a little beyond. Now that you have been already given this information, you can go a little beyond the information here. And this is here also like interestingly here you can define more like design principles clearly as to like how do you want to approach a problem, because here you've been given more time to think through the design solution rather than think through the discovery part of it. So this it is vague, and I think this is a stretch, and this is like people who are trying to like really be over smart is what I think. It could be much more simpler, but again, like if you just break it down and look at it from the first principle solution, it's just like the information is given to you, So you're expected to kind of put in more time on the definition and solution part of things, and less on the discovery part of things.
Yep. The next one is also quite good in this time. So Deva is asking, what's your take on AI in the context of design, and how do you use AI in your everyday workflow? Plus, I've heard companies are starting to prefer folks who are reliant on AI. What's your experience regarding
I
this?
think AI, obviously,
Elephant in
we
the room.
cannot deny that AI is here to stay for sure. And I generally use it as a more like a thought partner, because remote working, all of it, kind of doing that. What mistake that I used to do often with that is like as soon as I got a project, I would start doing that, which kind of took away from what my thinking and strength was, or like me distilling how I would distill a problem versus how AI would distill a problem would become like a very different thing. And like approach, like using it as the first step is something that I don't agree with anymore. I use it as a thought partner as to like if I feel stuck, or if I say if I once I have the clarity, then I can give them the prompt and use more for thinking or just brainstorming things. And mostly so far I've used it mostly for content also, and like you keep training them in terms of how do you like keep building that personality for a particular app. And a lot of these are becoming normalized in internally also. Like so for example, at Coinbase we have like something called CBGPT, which is like Coinbase GPT, which is basically much more controlled, and because of privacy reasons, we just use that. But in that, there are like various personalities for a content designer, for a researcher, where you can leverage, because you're constrained. Like you might not have like research and content at your disposal every time. So this is like the uh, mostly that I get they get used for, because replacing the resourcing, which is already less. So like generally we in every teams that I've been, there are like 1:5 ratio for design is to research or design is to content. So then
Mm,
you can utilize it, then make sure that you're able to polish your craft as much as possible. People, I don't think there is any specific requirement yet on people having AI skills for the job yet, because
mm,
I've not seen like those coming in. There are teams which are like much more on the startup side of things, where you are supposed to do multiple roles. There they might look at it, but in much more established companies, it might not be the most required skill set, because we are still hiring for your design thinking, which and your empathy for the user, which is not going to be built by AI. AI can give you structure to your thoughts, it can give you definition, it can help you polish things, and it can become your partner. Like for example, like try and do like this could be a good interesting exercise, like try and just do a whiteboarding challenge with the AI tool that you use today, and just see how does that help, how does it approach.
interesting. Also, another interesting question by Deva, and also a little out of tangent, but I'll share. So, I have been a graphic designer for a long time, and I'm looking into breaking into product design now. However, I don't really like designing for small screens. I am more of a cinematic, larger than life designer type who over delivers. What specific roles in product based ORGs can I find personal alignment in? And if product design is not the way to go
Yeah, this is
forward,
a great
what other
question. I
design
think what
roles can I aim
has
for?
happened is like because of the digital boom and like digitization of products, a lot of our designers, I know designers who are into transportation, who study transportation, coming into product design, coming into UI UX. I have known architects coming into UI UX. I have known I've just so far not met a doctor that's come into UI UX, but that's a joke that we often say that is going to be the way that everybody, because of the money that it offers and the kind of roles, the maximum roles available are there. And I think Deva, that is great that you have like self-awareness as to what you really like, and finding that role might be very niche. But I think what I am a graphic designer myself, so it is my first love, and I did like 5 years of branding, and I still love branding a lot, because again it gives you larger than life and going beyond just the screens. With screens also you could still achieve that. I think one way that you could probably do is getting into interaction and motion design, that will give you the same kind of satisfaction of the craft that you want. The other way that you can look at is being on the brand side of things on product organizations. So every product, generally successful like every mid companies will have a brand team, and you can start building that gap between the brand and like that product. You could be somewhere in the intersection of it very specifically, and those kind of roles are sometimes there, sometimes not there, but you might have to create it by yourself for that particular company if they're open to it, or if you've been working in a company for a while, you could probably kind of create a niche. I know that like I had a conversation with Urban Company once, and they were like one of the first people to kind of bring in content designers. With the core of it was to bridge the gap between the brand and the product, because the brand imagery and all of it was very different, and the product imagery and all of it was very different. So they were trying to create a role like that. With Spotify also, like creating editorial design system, the project that I did was mainly focused on creative direction and product. So there are these roles, but you'll have to really like either build it themselves, keep an eye out for it, or kind do these kind of work that might allow you to be intersection of product and brand.
Right. Also, another broad question, Raghavendra is asking that would love to get a list of
I
valuable
think
design
it's
books
a
that
there are like
you
a lot
read
of
or would you
books where
recommend?
it depends on exactly as to what you want to learn, right? And if you really like that, if you search, you'll find a lot of lists. Two, three books that I really like is I think the one that I'm reading currently is articulating design decisions, which has been very helpful in terms of people who struggle to bring like rationalize their design or keep voice for their design, because in like the broader or the larger organizations you only get 30 minutes with the leadership probably to present, and that can make or break your design. The other, I think, I can't think anything right off my bat, but I think it depends on the problem that you're facing, right? If you there's specific problem, there would be a book for it. And more than books, I think I generally also go towards a lot of medium articles which I read, which are like well written or follow some people that you really like. So what that does is like you're able to really follow somebody's journey and kind of get inspired by it. So it's like a you find like five people. For example, what I do is I found five people what whom I would like to be like, and then I read extensively as to what they share, what they do, what kind of work they do, and that has guided me more than the books. Books are helpful if you're just trying to solve or look for a specific problem to solve. So, like for me, basically, I'm reading this articulating design decisions because it's something that I've been struggling a little bit in terms of how to really present my ideas to the leadership.
Suraj is asking that right now he's pursuing BTech, and often what happens with him is that although his CV has better experiences in work, but still companies would prefer BTech students over him who has less work experience. So that doesn't really matter having a
I
BTech
don't
in design,
think so. I
or
think
the
like
self-taught thing
portfolio
versus
is
the
the
college
make or
thing.
break.
Hmm.
If your portfolio is good, I think it should be great. And I sometimes I feel it's it's like advantageous for me to hire somebody who's done engineering and knows design, because it covers both sides also.
Hmm.
I think it's just the portfolio and the craft and the design. The only
Hmm.
difference is the design people generally have tools that have allowed them to build a case study in a specific way, which gives them the advantage. But if you are able to cover all of that and build a case study or portfolio which is great enough, I don't think so. It's the degree might really make a difference.
Hmm. Right. Next one, Arun is asking, is it good if I use a pre-built low fidelity component to ideate on the screens by dragging drop in to test some layouts and hierarchy, some wireframing kit, or maybe something
I
like
think
balsamic
it's
lo-fi
100%
screens?
fine until
Is it
you
fine?
are able to articulate and justify, like bring out the idea that you really want to build. That should be something
Hmm.
that is the focus. Again, we're not, I think 80% of the time we're not looking at your visual skill or software using skills, right? We're looking at how well do you bring process structure to the chaos. And when you
Hmm.
get an idea, how well do you establish that idea? So
Hmm.
having buttons, probably image holders, all of this is fine, right? Because it's just optimizing for time, but not do not have like very specific components come in. Like use atoms, don't use like patterns. Use probably having those navigation bar and things like that. If that helps, it's fine. But it make sure that it is able to help you rather than restrict you. A lot of times using these
Hmm.
components might just restrict your thought process because you're trying to retrofit it. I generally don't use it, but I have seen people use it. And you can also like if you are doing an interview with somebody, you could just probably call it out that hey, like I just have this set of this and I would love to bring them in to ideate faster, and they would
Hmm.
kind of be okay with it. Just don't keep it in your file from before. Again, the structure also that probably you want to follow, right? Be it PAS, be it WWW. Don't keep the
Hmm.
structure pre-built.
Hmm.
Walk through as soon as you start like as the prompt is given, you can probably say that okay, like I would love to like first understand the problem, then I would like to solution. This is how I would approach the whole session. So what that happens is that you have already set expectations for the panel also, like this is how you're going to approach, versus having a pre-built format saying that okay, this is the format, and because there's no one way to go for it.
Right. Makes sense. Also, one last question. I'll just read loud and then we can close this off. So, could you outline some type of work that must exist in a seasoned product designer portfolio? The PM analog to this is product teardown, competitive analysis, market analysis, product sense, artifacts. What kind of work would you recommend having
I
in
think
a seasoned
there's no
designer, senior designer,
specific
in their
again things
portfolio?
for it, but something that has impacted the business for sure. So basically, that has changed the metrics, and your understanding of how those metrics were really impacted by the design or the designs that you built, right? So understanding of that value of design and projects that showcase how you can tie back to that metrics is something that is really important. Craft is really important, I think, in general. As people go senior, people think that the craft is not going to be that matter, but I think craft is going to be your first, be it any level, be it any role, your craft is going to be your first screening, your first kind of entry point to any of these things. Except that I think what once you go more senior, you understand that not every time it is going to be, it never generally is a very structured process. So
Hmm.
the more real story you share, the better it is going to be. It's never going to be like, oh, we got research and then we ideated the solutions and then we built the solution. It's going to be a lot of to and fro and understanding, bringing that understanding at least in the detailed case study. Probably in your portfolio, in your like presentation, smaller portfolio presentations, you don't need all of this. But in your more detailed case study, your portfolio presentation rounds, you could really structure it in the more real time scenario. So that what happens is that allows for understanding how you work in real scenarios and how do you tackle challenges in real scenarios. So that is, and how do you
Hmm.
bring in other design tools when these kind of solutions appears. When you probably go for example, in the process, when you learned that okay, there's a drop off happening in a certain area, you plan to launch two quick experiments to learn from it, and then you created a North Star. So that kind of understanding and that kind of thinking is something that will bring in more value versus like, hey, this was the problem and this is the solution, this is the metrics, and this is how I approached it.
Great, makes sense. Also, I'm dropping the link to our AI Vault. So we are building a platform where we are showcasing designers who are building end-to-end using AI. So you can find a lot of inspirations, and we are building more things in the AI space for the designers. So you can check out in the chat. And now, Prayag, really appreciate having you here, and such a wonderful session packed with insight. Like last one
Thank,
hour with the Q&A, it's really amazing. Thank you so much for your time again.
sorry.
In short.
The more we share, the more engagement we get, the better kind of people we can bring in.
Right.
But again, thank you so much, Shivam, Paras, Astitwa, for organizing and doing design originals. I think it's a great way to give back to the community. I'm happy to be more involved and would love
Yeah.
for like us to kind of see what more can we bring in. I hope again like this was helpful, insightful. Feel free to reach out to me if you would like more specific, or if you want to like probably do it. I would love to like help anybody and everybody as much as I can, and just kind of keep having fun in the process. Don't lose the fun is what I would point of given. But yeah, thank you so
Yep.
much.
Yep. Right. Okay. So thank you, everyone. And see you later for again next session, maybe. Bye bye.